Hey everybody, and thank you for joining me to hear this crazy story about what we found inside my BMW 328d wagon this past weekend. But before I get into those juicy details, a little bit or maybe a lot of bit of background is required. So the wagon has a little bit more than 85,000 miles on it, and every time I do my own oil change, I like to send an oil sample off to Blackstone so that I can get an idea of how the car's running. Why would I do that? Well, you know, I've driven this like an enthusiast would. It's my daily driver. I've tracked this like 8 to 12 days a year for 4 years, and you know, take it at speed and dirt and gravel roads. So it's far from your typical drive like a grandma case. So I want to know if the care that I'm giving the car, I need to do anything more for the engine. And thankfully, you know, through all of that, everything has always looked good. You know, my iron and aluminum and other wear metals have looked low. But about 20,000 miles ago, so about 66,000 miles, my oil report came back saying I had high concentrations of lead in the oil. Lead. Before, I had never had more than 3 parts per million, and now I was seeing 60. So that's crazy, you know, 20x times. The weirder part, though, is this engine is not supposed to have any lead in it. In fact, if you go and look at the N47 technical document, it says the bearings specifically are unleaded. Now, lead used to be a very common material in bearings, but you know, a little bit more than a decade ago, BMW and everyone else stopped using leaded bearings because the EU passed a law banning them. So where could this lead be coming from? Well, you know, Blackstone thought that it was probably some type of external contamination. And you know, I was willing to buy into that because once again, there's not supposed to be any lead at all in this engine. So I let it go. But then my next oil report from about 75,000 miles came out. And once again, I saw lead in that 55 to 60 ppm range. But maybe even more concerning though, was when I looked at my drain bucket full of oil, it looked like someone had taken glitter and sprinkled it all over the surface of the oil. There was metallic flakes all in there. And I decided to also take my oil filter and cut that open. And looking at that, I saw more metallic flakes, but even bigger ones. Like these are ones that are big enough I could take tweezers and pick out and put together. So that really concerned me. Now I did take a magnet to all those, you know, metallic flakes because they were kind of a silvery, copperish color, and none of them were magnetic. So I didn't think they were, you know, iron. And when my Blackstone analysis from that oil change came back, once again, for whatever reason, iron, aluminum, you know, those type of wear metals were all very low, very normal. So this was really confusing to me, and I honestly didn't know what could be causing this. You know, why was I having big metal particulate in my oil? Why was my engine, you know, engine oil showing high levels of lead? It kind of scared me, to be honest, because you know, a lot of people when they take their cars to the track, they're like, oh, I gotta do an oil change every other track day or something of that matter. And I had just been doing about the regular oil change interval. BMW recommends a 10,000 mile oil change interval on this, and I had been doing anywhere from 8 to about 10. And like I said previously on my oil analysis, it said, yeah, you know what, it's fine. You know, my wear levels are low. There's still additive package and protection left in the oil. I had been using, you know, just your standard LL04 5-weight 30 oil. Although I've been using the Mobil 1 ESP formula, which has been a fantastic oil. Unfortunately, they don't make it anymore. But anyways, so all those metallic flakes scared me, and I said, okay, the next oil change at 85,000 miles, I'm gonna do the rod bearings. So this past weekend, my friends at Love Shop Auto in Fremont, California were so kind to, you know, let me use the shop and help me out here, because quite frankly, I don't know what I'm doing when I'm pulling an oil pan and changing connecting rods. Haven't done it before. You know, I can read a procedure, but there's a lot of expertise that goes into actually knowing the nuances of how it all works, especially with these N47 engines where they basically have a Loctited gasket, and it's crazy how you have to try and pry the pan off of the block itself. But anyways, you know, we spend all the time to go through the pain of removing all the front drivetrain components so that we can get to the oil pan. We finally get the oil pan off. We look up the engine, and quite frankly, it looks pretty good. You know, I look around and I don't see like chewed up gears. Timing chain looks fine. You know, oil pump sprocket looks fine. I don't see any like things hanging out of the connecting rods. So we say, okay, fine, well, let's go ahead and pull apart some of the con rods to get to the bearings. So we start with cylinder one, forwardmost cylinder in the car, take that apart, and it looks great. These bearings look like they've just been broken in. Okay, well, let's go ahead and take the con rod on the opposite side of the block, number 4 off, because maybe that one's furthest away from, the oil injection. Take that apart, and once again, this bearing looks great, especially for 85,000 miles and all the track time and, not doing any short oil change intervals. So at this point, we start kind of scratching our heads. And I decide, okay, I'm going to take a look at the oil pan, because at this point we've left it on the floor, using it as a catch for all the residual dripping out of the engine. And so there's easily, half a liter or more of oil in there, so I can't see the bottom. So I pick up the oil pan, bring it over to my drain bucket. I start pouring it out, and I see a con rod bolt fall out, which is fine. We knew we had dropped that, taking out one of the con rod or the connecting rod halves, and I see something else in there. It looks like a little dowel. And I go and I pick it up, and what do I find? I find a freaking 22 unfired bullet. What the heck? How does a bullet end up in my engine block? So at this point, we're looking at each other like, what did I just find? Like, really? And we're all looking at this, pulling it apart like, is this a real bullet? But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it says Remington on the bottom of the casing here, and well, that would explain the lead perfectly, because the bullet is made out of lead. The most common bullets have lead cores, and this is no different. And well, okay, I saw a bunch of metallic shiny flakes. Could have been from the brass casing being chewed up a bit. So things are making sense as to what I was seeing in my oil report. But still, how does an unfired bullet get in the engine block? And to this day, I honestly have no idea, because there's only very few entry points that go into the engine block, right? You have your oil fill port, you have your dipstick tube, you have the drain plug on the bottom. I have no idea how else a bullet would get in there, especially an unfired one. But also, what's crazy too is I don't even own any Remington 22. The only 22 I have, the 22 rifle or firearm I have, is a 1928 Montgomery Ward's bolt action that's a family heirloom, and I've only ever shot it once. And that one time I shot it, I bought some Federal brand 22. So how did a Remington 22, a bullet that I don't even own, end up in my engine block? Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm changing my oil, I don't typically have loose ammunition lying around and just, I'm gonna toss it in the engine bay. So I'm, very, very confident that it wasn't me that put this bullet in my engine block. So thinking about, I don't know how else this could have done it. We've heard of pranks before, right? Car pranks. You sand or sugar in the gas tank, vegetables or whatever else in the exhaust, pouring some oil underneath the car. But I've never honestly heard of someone putting an unfired bullet in your engine to make you think you have high lead and then make you go do the rod bearings. But I gotta say, if this was a prank by somebody, you got me really good, because quite frankly, having to do rod bearings and seeing high lead in a BMW is pretty common on these older BMWs, and it always means your rod bearings are going. But once again, no lead is supposed to be in this engine at all. I have no idea how this thing got in there. So after getting over the shock and disbelief of finding a bullet in my engine, naturally there were a lot of laughs to be had, and a lot of really bad dad jokes too. So to torment you, I've decided to write a few down and share them. My car really dodged a bullet there. It's supposed to be Mustang bullet, not BMW 328d bullet. Why did the bullet hide out in my engine? So the boss couldn't find it and get it fired. What did the bullet and my engine have in common? They both misfire. BMW started building these engines in Ireland. This one was made by Rick O'Shea. My BMW would like to procreate, because BMW doesn't make diesels for the US market anymore, but it's shooting blanks. And finally, because I have a BMW, I've been putting off doing rod bearings. but I finally had to bite the bullet. So thanks for sticking with me here, guys. You know, I still have no idea how a freaking bullet ended up in my engine. If you have an idea, I'd love to hear about it. So please go ahead and shoot a comment, haha, below, and I'll see you guys next time.